Education. And we have Michael Quezada, who is a representative of UT Southwestern Medical Center, Ashley Borthwick, who is with First 3 Years, and then Michelle Nietert, who is with Community Counseling Associates. And then we have one panelist by proxy who was not able to be here, but shared her responses to some questions by email. So I'll be able to read what she had to say. I'd like to have our panelists introduce themselves and kind of talk a little bit about this whole COVID-19 thing. And then I will share with you what Amanda Rollins has from Kids Speak in Addison. And Alan is going to pop in and out with questions as they come up. So who would like to go first?
I'll go ahead and go, yeah. Hi, I'm Michelle Nietert. I'm the Clinical Director of Community Counseling Associates. I have a master's in counseling and I'm also a licensed professional counselor supervisor. So I actually train master's level counselors and through internship with the state of Texas. I have been practicing for 20 years. I've been supervising over a decade, and we have had UTD students, and very blessed to have them. We're grateful for them in our counseling center, observing private practice dynamics and activities for over a decade as well. So we've been partners with you guys for quite a while and enjoy having you in our offices and just the questions you ask and the learning experiences that you have. COVID-19 came on really fast, and I didn't know it was coming, but I knew we needed to get ready for telehealth because our competition was growing in that area. It was something I was hesitant to do at first because our board didn't immediately embrace it. But as I watched our board make changes and competition growing with offering telehealth counseling, we were beginning training for that with our staff. And I actually went overseas before everything went into sheltering in state. And when I came back, we converted the entire center of 15 therapists into telehealth services over the weekend. So on Monday, we opened up with most of our clients being seen through the telehealth. I did not have this background back then. I did not even have a home office really set up. And over that weekend, I set up a home office. And many of my staff did. And the ones who haven't been able to do that because they just didn't have the environment for that, they are coming into our offices. We have 8 offices in Allen and 1 in Lovejoy, Lucas area, and they are delivering services there. We do have some clients who need to come in for various reasons, and they are low risk towards getting sick or the consequences of being sick being severe for them. And so it's been interesting for us to watch this process. We're meeting as a staff by Zoom. We may actually continue that after because I have more staff being able to get in and we're less crowded than we were in our offices. We're going to have to be a little careful about that because we have had some bandwidth issues. I have had to upgrade some of our, I don't know if anybody else has experienced this, some of our dynamics as far as our servers and things like that in our office structure itself. So we've got enough Wi-Fi bandwidth to run 8 offices as well. And that's part of the reason I'm not up there a lot. Several of us who are more full-time are staying in home to keep that bandwidth free. So we're only running about 4 staff members in office at any one time. I think we're going to have a hybrid model going forward. Some of my staff, one was on maternity leave and returned into telehealth and really likes it. Teenage clients seem to really like doing counseling through telehealth. They like being in their bedrooms with their stuffed animals and their pillows and doing telehealth that way. Some of the kids like that too. They're showing me their teddy bears and we do art activities that way and play therapy. They bring their own toys and they play with their toys as we kind of work through things. And so it's been very interesting to interact in that way. As we're looking at students, honestly, we're trying to figure out, some of you have a practicum or internship starting with us this summer. And I'm trying to figure out, do I put you in the waiting room when we don't have a lot of clients because we're not asking them to be in the waiting room? Or do I have you maybe kind of come in and listen to some of us as we deliver content with client permission, of course. And then, of course, you'll be invited into our Zoom staff meetings. So we're kind of trying to figure that out. And I think I'll let some other people talk and then come back to like what I'm looking for when I'm hiring. So give some other people a chance to talk a little bit.
Sure, I'm happy to share. I am Ashley Borthwick. I am with First 3 Years. I actually have my master's through the HDCD program with UTD, so I'm an alum. Very happy to be here today. So First 3 Years operates, our mission is to educate, advocate, and collaborate to advance the healthy development of infants and toddlers and their families. And we do that in a lot of different ways. One way is through professional development, really elevating the 0 to 3 workforce and getting them the best applied research so they can put it into their practice immediately. Then we work in the foster care system by rolling out a co-parenting model between birth parents and foster parents, so it's less traumatic for children during that turbulent time. And then we really work in some advocacy work and some relational health work. And we collaborate a lot with different initiatives in the early childhood space to make sure that we're bridging silos across North Texas and even throughout the state. So we're all aware of what we're doing. I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about who we are to understand how we work. And so when COVID really hit, I too came back from vacation and was like, hey, a pandemic happened while I was away. I'll never take vacation again. So luckily, First 3 Years, we all operate out of our homes already. So we were very fortunate. I did have a home office set up. So we were versed and ready to start virtual work. And I won't say it was seamless because there was a lot of communication that needed to happen between staff, between clients. We had to move a lot of our in-person trainings to happen virtually. We have contracts with the state and some other organizations to do bigger trainings, full-day trainings that were having to pivot to full-day online trainings or splitting over day because you do get fatigue in front of your computer all the time. And not just that, there is so much webinar overload that we are challenging ourselves to make these even more interactive. And so learning all the different features on Zoom, polls and breakout rooms has just been really fun to learn, and we'll be using those moving forward. But also with our Safe Babies clients, it's different. Those are more client-based. We have caseloads for those. We've really had to pivot to add even additional wraparound services for those families, being a really big champion for them to help finish their services in this time and making sure that they feel supported. And we've been able to get some grant funding to even get them some gift cards during this, they might not have a job or they've lost some hours to that, and really supporting getting them ready for reunification, because that's our goal if it's safe. And so that could be strollers or car seats, just to make those all successful. And in terms of our operations moving forward, I think that's part of my role a little bit, is to make sure our operations run smoothly. And we just want to work on a fluidity for that. And so all my staff know who's using Zoom and when, and we are all on deep communication. We have monthly staff meetings, but we've also amped those up to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we can use bidirectional learning within our staff to solve community problems as well. And then in terms of our recruitment, I'm very excited to have interns this summer, and the ones that we will have, they'll be working in the professional development program with me. We're really going to be working on supporting our online courses, because that's one thing we were able to do, was offer 20 free online courses for anyone. It could be across the state, across the nation, and we're going to be amping those up for post-COVID, just listening to the feedback to make sure that we're meeting community needs in that realm, and just making sure our research is up to date. And a lot of what I do as well is operations, like I mentioned. And so I think it's really great when you work for an organization, you just don't know how to do your job. You understand the inner workings of a nonprofit, because if you want to move in a different role, you understand not just how you do your things, but why you do your things. And I think that's so helpful in troubleshooting your work. And so our interns will be shadowing me and how just like the little things happen in a nonprofit. And and I will say for hiring, and I will give other people a chance to speak as well. While across the board hiring might be down, it's not stopping. Especially with for us particularly, we have grants that we still have to fulfill, and we have grant positions that are funded, and so we're looking for those folks to finish to fill that work. So I'll take a pause on myself.
Okay. Janie, I believe you're on mute if you were speaking.
I was being so polite. Thank you, Ashley. Michael, do you want to go be up next?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. Am I on mute? Am I good to go? All right. Well, hello, everyone. Happy to be here today. And, it's amazing. We have these type of remote meetings. Those that are participating today, that says a lot about you, that you took that step to, that ownership to learn more, to kind of understand what's going on currently with COVID-19 and what the business world is doing and how you can kind of better prepare yourself for the workforce. So my name is Michael Quesada. I'm a talent acquisition partner. I work in recruiting and also HR business partner. I've been doing this about 12 years now. I retired from the military in 2012. I have a bachelor's degree in human resource management and an MBA. One of the things I really focus on is also working with veterans, working with the veterans at UT Dallas, working with veterans that are going through school, and help them kind of prepare for that transition. And human resources is so diverse, but one of the things that never changes is that diversity and that readiness. When I look at any new graduate, and I'm looking at our situation now with COVID-19 at our healthcare system at UT Southwestern, where we have over 18,000 employees. I'd say about 70% of them right now, maybe less than that, are actually starting to trickle in. We're starting to kind of get a feel for some of the do's and don'ts, compliances, when to wear a mask, when not to wear a mask. There's a lot going on. And so the more that you know while you're actually going to school and while you're actually completing your education about what businesses are doing right now to prepare for COVID-19, what are some of the changes that you may want to know about? So if you're selected for an interview, you can speak on those things, specifically safety, also actually transitioning and working remotely and how it affects, how would you be effective if you were working 2 days remotely and 3 days in the office? What are some of the things that, how would that make you more effective? And what would be your 90-day plan if you were to come into an organization and you had to work part-time remote, part-time in the office? Hiring managers are always are looking for that niche, something that sets you apart from the other candidates. And again, if you're here today, that says a lot about you, that you could have been doing something else. You could have been outside, you could have been fishing, but you chose to be here. One of the things that we're also doing with some of the universities is we're talking to them about generational training. We think it's so important, and we'd like to see in the future universities integrate generational training into their curriculum prior to you guys graduating. Let me tell you why. Because if you come to a large organization like Baylor, UT Southwestern, Parkland, there's different generations, baby boomers. There are millennials. There you have your Generation Xers like myself, and we all have our own way of looking at things, different perspectives. So as we go through and we're recruiting for candidates online, we get hundreds of candidates. We hire about 650 people a month easily. Our team consists of about 22 recruiters. We have about 12 coordinators. So we have a lot of volume. And so one of the things that we do is of course, when we're having that, we find a candidate that's ready, we're going to contact you and we're going to kind of get a good feel for you. And the more you understand about who you're talking to, the better the better prepared you're going to be. So I'd say if anything today, later I'm going to talk to you a little bit about preparation and readiness, because if it's great that you're ready to transition and go out there and do big things, but understanding human relations and what the listener is focused on when they're talking to you, and what the reader, the recruiter, when they're looking at your resume is focused on, is so important before you hit submit. We see a lot of new grads, not really, that they're in a hurry and they're submitting those resumes and they're uploading that application, and there's a lot of mistakes, or they're just trying to push it out there and cross their fingers. And what I would suggest to you is really go out there and integrate with guys like ourselves, or ladies like baby boomers and Generation Xers. You got to integrate with those, because those are the ones that are out there hiring right now. We're the ones in those leadership positions right now, and soon you guys will be the millennials, and those that are in the younger generations. You have to understand what we're looking for. So when I take your resume over to the hiring manager, she's going to understand that I found someone that has a lot of potential. So when we bring you in, you're prepared. And at UT Southwestern, again, we get hundreds of candidates, and we get a lot of candidates that just don't know why we're not calling them. And sometimes it's so simple. It's something that they just continue to send the same resume. They upload the same resume for 12 jobs. And just understand that a lot of these hiring managers, they can look into your record, and they can see how many jobs you applied for. So if you're sporadic and you're applying for an admin assistant and a coordinator and a project manager, if they're all mixed up and they're not in the same job family, then that kind of says, hey, this person doesn't know what they want. By looking at a job description, if you read it specific a job description, that hiring manager wrote that. Recruiters will sit with hiring managers before we post a position, and we have that conversation. And they say, okay, John, is this what you're looking for? Are you sure? Because I'm about to post this position. This is what the job description says. Keep in mind that person that wrote that is going to interview you. So the more you know about that job description, and the more you understand that before you hit submit, make sure everything has been answered according to that job description, and that's going to increase your chances. So very glad, again, to be here, and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Okay, Michael, thank you. That was important information, and it's nice to hear from you the same things that we as career consultants are trying to instill in students.
Right.
And it was really important. I picked up on what you said about the human relations piece and the intergenerational piece needing to be part of academic curriculum.
Yes.
Because you're absolutely right. Students are in a hurry, and they don't take the time to understand the people that they're talking to, and maybe haven't been taught how to understand the people they're talking to. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Shelby, I think you're up next.
Yes, I think I am. Hi, everyone. I am Shelby Vogel. I am a recruitment manager with KIPP Texas Public Schools. A little bit about me: former teacher, former nonprofit operations manager, but I've really found my passion here with KIPP Texas Public Schools in the last 3 years. Really having the opportunity to connect amazing and passionate educators or aspiring educators to our schools and roles, where you can have a positive and lasting influence not only on our students but also on our communities across the state in Austin, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio. As I kind of reflect back on this whole COVID-19 pandemic, all of this really happened in education as we were transitioning to or from spring break, depending on what city you were in. And I think for me, it really just highlights that teachers and our leaders in education are truly capable of anything and everything, from sacrificing their entire spring break to, changing how they do things in a matter of days, because we know that that is the most important and most critical thing for our students. It's just been really impressive to watch, and I don't know if I've seen any other industry respond in the same way that education has. As I think about, how it's changed my work and how it's changed how we bring people into our opportunities, it's really changed the way that we've had to shift our interactions with people. In particular, we've gone from a very highly personalized approach, multiple in-person events, multiple touch points, both in person as well as over the phone, and kind of I think for me, the hardest part has been limiting the opportunities to connect candidates with kids and staff members at schools, because that's just not possible in this, reality in this environment. But really thinking through, how do we still find people who are great for our schools and are going to make that lasting impact when all of this isn't possible. And so we've really focused on finding people who demonstrate grit and perseverance and all of these like traits and mindsets that we know are critical not only to being in education, but are going to keep you there when things do change and when hurdles are thrown at you. But I also want to talk a little bit about education as a whole. It's an interesting place to be in this day and time, because as you kind of think about opportunities, they're not going anywhere, right? There are still teacher opportunities. Teacher demand is at an all-time high, but teachers are some of the folks who in this, environment have the highest levels of job security, but they also have a very low appetite for lateral moves. And so you're not seeing teachers moving from one district to another in the ways that they typically do. And so for us, it's really changed the way that we think about how do we bring people in. And we're still focusing in on that, but we're also really doubling down on what we've known to be true for the last couple of years, which is that for teaching to be sustainable, we have to find ways to build teachers who are not naturally coming to us. So people who are not graduating with degrees in education, but have a passion for impacting kids and students and communities. And so we've really doubled down on our pathway programs and expanding that to bring people who have that passion, who are, sometimes career changers, and giving them a gradual on-ramp into teaching, pairing them with master teachers so they can really learn the tools of the trade and feel prepared and set up for success as they transition into a classroom environment on their own, in a year. So that way, we can kind of start to right some of those trends that we've seen in education. As I mentioned, demand for teachers is at an all-time high, but so is teacher burnout. And we're seeing less and less students enter into education programs. And so our pool is dwindling. We also have teachers retiring at higher rates than we've had historically. And so we have to find ways to overcome this. We know that teacher pipeline programs are a part of that. But we also know that there are many transferable skills that students have as they enter into various different programs that can actually be really beneficial in classroom settings. In particular, people who have a passion for working with kids and mental health. We know that as a teacher, that is something that you deal with on a daily basis. Kids nowadays have higher and higher rates of adverse childhood experiences than kids of any other generation. And folks who have a background in mental health, who but might be drained by that, are really great teachers because they're able to deal with those things in the moment, and they're really able to make sure that it's not just educating children about academics, 2 + 2 = 4, but it's about how do we educate a whole child? How do we prepare them with the skills and the mindsets to be successful, both academically, but when they leave our doors, because we know we can't control what happens, when they go home. And so I think for us, that has been, one of our biggest learnings and one of our biggest successes so far. I think just to shine a light on our amazing educators, we've all heard the stories about distance learning and just kind of the fatigue that is and the challenge that it is. And all of that is true. But our approach is a little bit different. We want to make sure that our kids are getting the academic knowledge that they need to, grow and progress. But we also know that a lot of this is about creating stability. And so our focus is not just how many kids are logging on to do their lessons, how many of them are turning in their homework. These are all things we want them to do. But how many connections our teachers are able to have each week with students to let them know that, even though we're not here and we're not face to face, we're still here to help you be successful and help you overcome, the things that you're struggling with. And so that's really been our big success, more so than anything, is that our teachers are making contact with upwards of 90% of their students on a weekly basis to just provide that affirmation and assurance that even though we're not here, we're still here for you.
Good.
So thank you, all four of you. I am going to take a minute to read the responses from Amanda Rollins. She is the owner-director of KidsSpeak in Addison, and their focus is speech pathology. So I'm going to read exactly what she wrote. She answered all of those questions that I sent to you, all of you. And then I'll look like I'm reading things. So that's what I'm doing. And then I'll come back and talk with all of you. So here is me pretending to be Amanda Rollins. So Amanda says, I'm a speech and language pathologist co-owner of KidsSpeak, LLC, a speech and language private practice in Addison, Texas. We've been open for 12 years. We hire speech and language pathologists, speech and language pathology assistants, speech and language pathology interns, teaching assistants, and more. We also have a volunteer program that runs by semesters where we have anywhere from 6 to 10 or more volunteers. And our volunteers are usually undergraduate students in speech pathology or psychology or education. And students are usually, and we also have students that are in between their undergraduate and their graduate years. We currently work with patients that are 18 months of age all the way through adulthood. Our patients typically have diagnoses of language delay, language disorder, articulation disorder, social communications, and executive functioning difficulties, and difficulty with emotional regulation, things like ADHD, anxiety, autism, and more. We provide families with a variety of services, including individual therapy, group therapy, home consulting, and school consulting. We currently have a few products for sale on our website that include visual aids for families and teachers and therapists to use. And they also have some things on the website that are for families only and are not advertised. Excuse me. So the overall goal is to be able to provide an atmosphere where therapists feel supported and continuing to learn, while also providing best services for families that are 100% individualized services for each family. Due to COVID-19, we've made lots of changes within our company. First, we had to cancel all of our group therapy sessions mid-semester. We usually offer group therapy by semesters, and all the groups are individualized for the children in those sessions. And that means we match all the kids based on their skill sets, and we plan the group around them. This allows us to maximize our patients' progress and carry over each semester. In the fall and the spring, we usually have 2 to 4 groups with 2 to 6 kids in each one, and 2 to 4 therapists participating in each group. Typically in summer semesters, we have anywhere from 10 to 15 groups with between 2 and 9 children and 2 to 6 therapists. This summer, we canceled the majority of our groups. We have one group that will start in June with 3 children and 1 therapist. And these children have already participated in groups at KidsSpeak, so they are familiar with the routines and they need less physical help. And we are able to social distance better with this particular group of children. We have 3 other potential groups that we may be able to start in July. And we also do some groups by telehealth. The next change we made was within individual therapy. All of our sessions had to be immediately canceled, and the change hit around spring break, so many of our therapists were off that week, and they had to spend their week learning, as some of you just mentioned a few minutes ago, learning how to do the different telehealth platforms and take everything online. The next change we had to make was to cancel all of our in-person home and school consulting. And now we're having to move toward charging for phone calls, as well as setting telehealth home and school consulting services all up online. Another change was in canceling the volunteer program halfway through the semester. Normally, our summer program has 10 volunteers, and this summer we will only have 4. We only have 1 volunteer per morning or per afternoon, and volunteers are not going to be allowed to observe any one-on-one therapy, but they will be allowed to observe teletherapy. I think that's something that we heard from Michelle a few minutes ago about students being able to observe by teletherapy, where they might not have been able to observe in-person therapy. One area in our field has been affected the most and has the potential to continue to be affected. That's the field of speech pathology assistant. In the state of Texas, speech language pathology assistants, SLPAs, are not allowed to provide telehealth services. But about a month into the order of shelter in place, Governor Abbott signed a waiver allowing them to provide telehealth in the state of Texas. But we're unsure of when the waiver will end. It's 100% associated with this declaration of disaster in our state. So every month, we're waiting to see if he extends that and therefore allow our SLPAs to still provide that services. But when he does not, then they will not be able to provide those services. And the same is true for students who are in their clinical fellowship, which is after they finish their graduate program and are under supervision for about 9 months. They will not be able to provide telehealth services either. So telehealth is a service. This is answering the question about changes permanently moving forward. Telehealth is a service that I personally never thought we would be providing. However, I've been very pleased with the progress our kids are making. And this is a service now that we are always going to provide for our families. We're not only seeing kids continue to make progress, but we're also seeing more parent involvement, and the parents are seeing more progress. So we will continue to explore all the different ways that we can provide services across a variety of platforms and serve new families and current families across the entire state. If families are moving outside of the state of Texas, their therapists can continue to see them by telehealth if they have a license in that state. So that's opened it up for us to be able to help more families. Changes in the future are coming. I'm not being specific about which ones I see, but I know they're coming. How is your company handling future recruitment? So in mid-March, we were in the process of hiring 3 new therapists. We typically hire 1 to 2 new therapists in the spring, 1 to 4 in the summer semesters. We were unable to hire any of them this spring or this summer. For our student interns, we typically have them participate in a volunteer program for a semester, and then the second semester, they can participate in an internship. That hasn't changed, but as I said earlier, we're down from 10 volunteers this summer to only 4. And we're hopeful that as Dallas and Texas and the US as a whole discover what our new normal is, that we'll be able to hire again close to that same capacity that we had in the past. The way we handle our recruiting process has not changed. We're very fortunate to have a brand within our industry where most therapists and some students know who we are, and we have a great relationship with universities in the area. So when we're looking for volunteers, we send an email to the undergrad and graduate coordinators in universities such as UTD, and they send them out on a listserv. So for interns for the summer, what will those experiences look like? We will just have 4 versus 10, and it'll look very different as they won't be able to have one-on-one contact with patients. The biggest piece of advice that I have for students looking for opportunities right now is to say yes. Say yes to opportunities that are provided to you by professionals in your field, even if it's not your ideal. The more you say yes, the more you are going to stand out. The more you stand out, the more opportunities will come your way. In addition, the more you say yes, And the more opportunities come your way and you do a nice job, that's building a relationship between you and whoever's in charge. And I know in my field, building a relationship is one of the biggest things that can help you stand out. As a mentor to many students over my 15-year career, the students that have said yes to everything, I have given more opportunity to. We build a stronger professional relationship. And sometimes this leads to building a personal relationship that benefits students, including potential jobs at my office or at my colleagues' offices, being recommended for graduate school, me being a reference on their resume, continuing to mentor them throughout their career, and more. So my biggest piece of advice is to build a relationship with anyone you come into contact with in your field. And the fastest way to do that is by saying yes. So additional advice, and then I'll turn it back over to the panel. If you're moving forward in a career that has a license that is regulated by the state, I urge you to go to the Texas Department of Licensing and really learn about your license. What are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do? What does the state regulate? Are there different levels to your license, and so on? If you're in speech and language pathology field, I also recommend joining the Texas Speech Hearing Association and becoming involved with them. We as professionals need to be sticking together and lobbying for many things for our field so that we can continue to grow as therapists while providing care to patients, including the telehealth services and more. I also highly suggest being 100% of what is happening in the state, in the country, and around the world by looking at where you're getting your information from. There are so many reliable sources, but there are also many unreliable sources. And if you're moving into a career where you're in the service industry or the medical industry, you need to be aware of what is true and what is false, so you can also help educate the people that you work with and the people that you serve. So that was, excuse me, so that was from Kid Speak and speech pathology. And I heard from Amanda several things that I heard from all of you about telehealth, specifically about how everybody had to adapt in almost 24 hours from elbow to elbow, face to face contact with people to doing everything online. Alan, do we have any student questions?
Yes, Janie, actually we have a few. So the first one is for community counseling, Michelle. The question has to do with telehealth counseling that you referenced. This student's wondering, are there any confidentiality concerns or concerns with privacy and potential licensure? Can you address that, please?
Yeah, and this is where keeping up with regulations, you not only have to keep up with the regulations of your state, we're contracted with payers like Blue Cross Blue Shield, and we have to keep up with their regulations as well. For example, previously, we could not provide telehealth services to a large part of their population. They under contracted with a company that paid therapists about half as much as I pay therapists, and those were the only people who could provide telehealth services. And you didn't even get the same counselor every time you came in necessarily. But Blue Cross changed all that as this went through, and we now are able, and we think it's going to stay. Right now, they keep extending it month by month. But we think the customer demand is going to create a demand for this coverage to stay in place. I'm hearing HR people saying that they're going to ask for that. This offering a telehealth option gives a lot more accessibility, not only solving an issue for people who have a hard time getting services, who may be hourly waged and things like that, but it also is going to create a solution in Texas. We, like in the area I am, we're overpopulated with mental health professionals, but there are rural areas where they're very underpopulated, and it allows us, where we're overpopulated, to be able to serve those populations and resolve some issues there. So just to let you know kind of some dynamics of this, like we were already using, my husband's a healthcare consultant. He manages huge practices all across the country. And so I had heard him talking about EHR systems way before counselors and some of us in private practices were using them. So we had already initiated a high quality EHR system. We had even converted from a previous one, and that's an electronic health record system where clients' appointments, notes sometimes are kept, their intake paperwork. We were already there. So that was super helpful. That's why I was able to convert over a weekend, because all I had to do was activate the video component to that. I had also done a lot of research on telehealth providers and costs. So I already knew exactly what decisions I was making there and very quickly could get my staff up and running with that as well. So we're using most of my staff for the most part. Level 1, we kind of have levels here, is a HIPAA protected, encrypted healthcare telehealth delivery system. Now, however, people's internet varies from where they are. We have quality internet where we are in general, unless my child gets to gaming upstairs at a ridiculous level, and then mine will get a little wonky and I'll have to go say, shut it down. I cannot have this level of Fortnite because I'm on a Zoom or whatever. And that's just the reality we're all dealing with as telehealth providers. But we have also gotten a waiver from the federal government that if we need to use a non-encrypted service such as FaceTime or Zoom to complete our telehealth services, we are no longer, my husband's a HIPAA auditor. A HIPAA auditor cannot come in and start citing me for those violations, that we have a waiver in place for those. So sometimes I do have, like, an adolescent doesn't get in the system right, or, and I follow up with the FaceTime call and have a great conversation and session with them with treatment goals and processing and all those interventions. So there are concerns, I think, but at the same time, here's what I'm seeing in the consumer population. They are not nearly as concerned about their privacy as their access to services and the ease of access to services. So a lot of my clients would rather come on through a FaceTime than through a telehealth system that they may not be used to using. Especially when you look at less educated populations, you're looking at an intimidation factor, downloading apps. Geriatric populations, I had to have, I walked a client through the process on a FaceTime so she could actually use, she was an older client in a rural area, telehealth services with me. She did not have that skill set and ease to be able to do that on her own. And that's creating some anxiety, which is the very thing I'm working on with her. So I hope that answers your question. I also wanted to speak to a little bit as I'm looking to hire students, what I'm looking for. And so we do hire, like, we keep 15 therapists running at all times. We have several practicum students and we have interns as well. And when I'm looking to hire, what gets you to the top of my resume stack is not your grade point average. I'm really sorry. I know that you feel like that's very important. If it's really low, I'm going to knock it down because that talks to me maybe about work ethic, but it may not. I've been a previous reading specialist. It may have more to do with those type of things that you haven't learned to compensate for. But what I'll tell you, what I'm looking for are transferable life skills. So what I'm looking for is, as an undergraduate, like all of us treat adolescents. Did you work with kids in some manner? Have you been in a nonprofit system? Have you volunteered hours? The majority of the people that I actually end up selecting for master's level practicum have volunteered with us previously. Several of my staff members started out as undergrads in programs like UTD, built relationships with us, went and got their master's degrees. I've got one right now. She's been with me 3 times. She's come back at every practicum level, from bachelor's to master's and now doctorate level, coming back to us as a staff member to participate with us. And that's all about who you know is more important than what you know. And it's about building those relationships, and getting unpaid internships make a huge difference, at least in my field. I'm also looking, did you maybe get a job as a mental health tech in a psych hospital? Did you work as a certified nurse assistant? You understand patient confidentiality and some of the practices I'm looking for. But I'll tell you a new area that's kind of interesting. I had 2 people I was interviewing, and they were almost even in these areas. One of them had been a previous social media manager for her brother-in-law's business on the side. Now, our counseling center doesn't have the greatest. If you want to practice, you are usually the marketing person, the social media manager. I just got out of being the business manager and the bookkeeper recently. You wear a lot of different hats. I think Ashley could talk to that. As operations is really like every hat you can imagine as a business owner and entrepreneur. And so when I see somebody with another skill set, I asked her in the interview, I give them supervision for free. I do not charge for supervision, but what we ask for in exchange is 5 hours of volunteer time from our internship people. And so I said to her, how would you feel about upgrading our social media involvement in your 5 hours? And she's done such a good job. I've hired her on the side for an additional 5 hours a week, because she's really elevating our presence, where now our main presence used to be in meetings and schools and places like this. My presence is much more online than it's ever been as a business. And so having that as an asset got her hired over someone else with almost the same skill set. So that's something else to be thinking about is, are you able to manage things like Zoom and even this? I will make a confession. I have never used Microsoft Teams until this morning. So, but I have enough transferable skills that I was able to download the app, even on my Mac. I was a little worried about that. Was I going to have to go in the other room and not have a good camera and all those types of things? But because I have transferable skills, having used multiple platforms, it took me about 15 minutes before I actually popped in to get this all set up. And I had to take the initiative to do that. And I'm going to talk about that last. A lot of counselor training is free in this area, and now it's online and free. So I'm looking, if you don't have a skill set in play therapy, have you consumed some free continuing education coursework? And maybe your school didn't offer that skill set, but did you create that on your own? I'm looking for, this is what I get. I'm very fortunate. I've been around for 20 years. I get to hire the very best of the best. I have way more applicants than I could ever begin to look at, just like Michael was talking about. And what I'm looking for is, do I see a pattern on the resume and in my interview of a person who takes both personal, because we're dealing with mental health, and professional growth seriously? Mental health is a very stressful job. I think Shelby referenced that sometimes mental health burnout will lead into education. I think I'm the opposite. I used to be the crisis counselor for a school district, and I converted to private practice. So I kind of burned out in the other direction. But with that, I'm looking to see who is going to do the extra reading. I require a lot of training because I do consider my staff elite. And the reason they're elite is they are reading on their own. They are required to attend trainings. And if you're not making that part of your lifestyle, you may not fit in really well with us in that process, because you're going to meet a very competent group of professionals who are very solution focused. We get audited by insurance panels, and a lot of times they've offered to hire me to consult by the time I was done with the audit, because it was so thorough and so well done by the notes that my staff have. And that's the kind of people we're looking for.
Thank you, Michelle. That was really informative. Alan, are there any other questions?
Yes, absolutely. So the next question is for Shelby. Shelby, you spoke about transferable skills, and this student is wondering, with Texas public schools, is it still a requirement to have a state licensure or a teaching certificate?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to be perfectly honest, it tends to vary. So KIPP Texas Public Schools, as a charter school organization, we do not require you to be certified in all content areas. So if you are, interested in being a math teacher, for example, we do not require you to be certified at time of hire, but we do want you to be on a pathway towards certification. And so our policy is essentially that you're able to be hired without that, but by the end of your first year, we want you to have that, because we do know that that is, a credential that is essential, and that really allows us to ensure that we have highly qualified teachers in our building. But of course, there are, positions where that is a requirement. So if you are interested in becoming a special education teacher, we are required by the state for you to have a certification with the Texas Education Agency that proves that you are able to teach special education. Other positions such as pre-K also have those same limitations. And then of course, our positions that we have school-based or even kind of in our regional offices, such as speech language pathologists or LSSPs or our social workers, you are also required to have those certifications on file or those licensures with the state departments that regulate those. But with that in mind, we also know that sometimes that is a hurdle, which is another thing that really makes us believe in doubling down on our teacher pathway programs. All of those programs do have a built-in certification and licensure component.
Okay, thank you, Shelby. Michael, so the question is, you had referenced people applying for multiple positions. And so the question is, this student asks, they said that they have multiple skills and they could probably apply for multiple positions. Is there kind of a limit that you don't want to go above? They're trying to figure out, I guess, how many jobs can they apply for?
That's a good question. In fact, especially right now in this situation, we have a lot of have some candidates that are just really desperate, and they just, of course, they probably have a lot of skills that they could probably have the potential to do certain jobs. But I'd say look at I'd say normally I'd say that the average that we see is I've seen some apply for 20 jobs. I've seen some apply for 5 jobs. It depends. But I think if you're going to apply for more than 5 jobs, or if you see positions that you feel that you have the skill sets for, really pay attention to the job description and keep in mind that you want to keep them in the same job family. A lot of times, if you see a position that's working in with patients, and then you see another position that's working in a cubicle, you see another position that you're working with animals, that may tell the hiring managers that you're not really looking to work specifically for them. You're just looking for a job. So I'd say just be careful with that, because if you have the potential, if you have the skill sets to serve in a role and you feel very confident about it, the best way to kind of judge how many you want to apply for is maybe submit your resume, submit a very strong resume to 2 positions, and wait on it. Kind of take a breath, and after you've done everything, you've verified that you can serve in that role. You've given good examples on your resume. I'd say that you don't want to overdo it. Again, because most of our ATS systems or application tracking systems, a lot of times managers, they can kind of look at your history, and if we're seeing that you're applying for a number of positions, and you've been declined a few times, and you haven't changed anything, you haven't increased your education, you haven't updated your resume, it may kind of give them the indication that this is how you would do it if we were to bring you on board. Is this what if you're not recognizing that, the positions that you're applying for, they all may have some small details, but you have to keep in mind that your resume is telling that recruiter and that hiring manager, I'm the perfect candidate for this job right here. I saw this job and this was me. I can do this job and I'm the perfect candidate. But so I think that just keep in mind, again, if you apply for more than one job, it almost seems as if you're just looking for a job. If you've gotten a degree in project management or healthcare administration, focus on that job family. Even if it's in finance or a specific area that you feel strong in, and you've gotten some internship experience, focus on that area first. Because again, you don't want to overdo it, and you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot because you were just desperate. But yeah, that's mine.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And I know we're at about 4 minutes to the top of the hour. Ashley, this is a 2-part question, but I think they're semi-easy questions. The first is, how many employees do you currently have? And what percentage of interns do you have that turn into potential full-time employees?
Good question. So first 3 years is relatively small. When I joined, there were only 4 or 5 people on. Now we're a staff of 12 with 1 part-time person. So And that's a statewide presence. So like Michelle had said, we wear lots of different hats. In terms of conversion from intern to employee, I have had interns in the past come on as like part-time employees while they're still in school. I've had that happen a couple of times. Actually, one person was able to come on and cover my maternity leave. She was just so fabulous. So I was able to download my job into her, which was amazing, and I didn't worry about a thing. Interns, and we've had that happen additionally for our PD program as well. They've been able to come on as part-time. And to full-time staff, you know, even I was a volunteer before I came on. That's how I started with first 3 years. And I was in my internship when I volunteered. So I don't have a conversion rate. Because we're so small and our programs vary across the state, I don't have a conversion rate, but it does happen.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. And Janie, that's it for the questions in the chat room.
Okay, thank you, Alan. I really appreciate that you moderated those chats for me. Thank you very much for your support and your help. And for my panelists, I can't tell you how excited and happy I am with this panel. I was really worried that nobody would come, and you all came. And your conversation has been wonderful. The information you shared for our students is really valuable, and I think it's the most, I think it's the best thing from them when they hear from you practical tips and practical applications. And I think it's been really helpful for them to hear that while they've been struggling to do everything online, you all have been struggling to do the same thing. And I think we all expect employers to know what they're doing. And the fact that you all have had to navigate this and struggle with the changes and consider different kinds of software and programs to use and how to expand your services, as well as how to keep your engagement with students, I think that information is really great for us to hear. Thank you all so much for helping with this panel today. If you have questions for me later, if there's a way you'd like to connect with me and our team later, please feel free to email me. Thank you again for all your participation today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thanks.